So this is just after 8 a.m. UK time and 8 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time on Saturday, the 6th of March 2021. And we are continuing with the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. And the word world and the exclusive, these are genuine words. The world is going to be kind of propaganda bombed by the Fleet Street couriers of lies for Brenda, also known as the Queen Elizabeth II, because the integrity of Brenda and her business called the monarchy is coming under increasing focus and attention, although it may be coming from or may be based on the estimated viewing or viewers figures tomorrow, Sunday, in America or the USA and North America. But the franchise and the kind of contract for rebroadcasting the Oprah Winfrey interview in all the continents are already in place, and they will bring Oprah Winfrey and her production company very significant amounts of money. Now, there is nothing in terms of business and in terms of propaganda that Brenda's family can actually match in terms of beating or countering Oprah Winfrey. And the more the Brenda family kind of spews out hatred and misinformation and smears against Meghan Markle and Harry, the worse it will be for the Brenda family to maintain any kind of credibility whatsoever. Because unlike the kind of benefit of the doubt that she was given following the murder of Diana in France in August 1997, and the fact that Brenda made quite clearly a business advised strategic statement using the Latin phrase annus horribilis. Unlike the benefit of the doubt that Brenda's confession to having had the annus horribilis, she is not likely to have similar sympathy this time round. And I'm making a very measured statement there. Because this week, for the second time, Meghan has been given a court order in her favor against a newspaper. And this is not something that the courts would have done in terms of maintaining their pretense to being in kind of impartial. Because there too, as I have said about David Neuberger, saying that the world's disputes will be brought to London for resolution. Neuberger was not talking about justice. Neuberger was echoing Nelson, that the English, let's say paraphrasing, just for the sake of accuracy. If he said British, then we'll update the wording. But Let's say he said the English. Napoleon Bonaparte said that the English are a nation of shopkeepers, or the British are a nation of shopkeepers. And the propaganda that David Neuberger, the first president of the so-called Supreme Court, echoed. He said about Brexit, and he was acting to David Lidington, who was already in place as the so-called justice minister. But a justice minister, or also the chancellor, Lord Chancellor so-called, and the word Lord is always used by us within quotation marks. Now, David Neuberger was acting as an extension of the propaganda for Brexit that David Lidington was keen to emphasize and stress. And Neuberger said that the courts, London courts, would become the very attractive center of litigation. What he didn't say in detail, but what he meant in context, was that all the London courts, the High Court, mainly the divisional court, where a lot of libel claims are kind of dealt with, the divisional court, Queen's Bench Division, which is the largest of the divisional courts, and also the Chancery and some other parts of the High Court and the Court of Appeal and the rest of it. But the main activity takes place in the divisional courts, and the Queen's Bench Division carries the largest bundle or bundles of cases. So what Neuberger was saying was that the brothel of litigation, English litigation, would be opened as a result of Brexit. Now, this is too early. First of all, Neuberger was spewing, and spewing is used as a negative word by me, because Neuberger was lying on order. And Neuberger wasn't wearing a wig. So he looked like he's bald-headed, and he hasn't got the wig, and he was just coming across as a merchant, promoting the collective brothel of the English courts based in London. And he was saying that in order to bolster the campaign by Theresa May for Brexit at the time. And the idea that London would become the most attractive center of dispute litigation was a pimp's propaganda. It wasn't a statement inviting combatants for justice. And the London courts are never forums for justice. The more money the litigant has, that is, the punter has, the more likely is the litigant, either a man or a woman, to be given an airing in the brothel of the court system. For example, the ex-wife of one of the richest Russians, I think she is still in litigation, and she is in litigation serially against her own son, as well as against her ex-husband. And these are, or her litigation is a case in point about the brothel role that the London High Courts play to suit the actual egos and the corrupt tendencies and revenge of the illegitimately overly rich persons, most of whom are nationals of other countries, not nationals of the UK. But they are given the airing. Remember what we are talking about. We're talking about the ruling dated the 26th of February, mouthed by this man, Reid, posing as the president of the so-called Supreme Court. And he was refusing the right to the British-born Shamima Begum to have her claim against the removal of her British citizenship by the UK government. Now, look at the contrast. When I say brothel, you can see the brothel being in action. Because this wife of the, or ex-wife of the Russian so-called oligarch, I hate that word oligarch. It absolutely is meaningless. She's a big business, big moneyed people, and they should have an appropriately obscene kind of tag to them, not oligarch. And this wife of the ex-wife of this so-called oligarch is a millionairess, or she has enough money or enough connections, let's say, with enough collectors of brutalizing fees collectors or raisers of funds, because she's European and she doesn't have any kind of race or ethnicity related kind of ground on which to make the extra argument, which Shamima Begum has had to make, even if she is more English and more British than any of those Russians will ever be, those ones that are coming to use the brothel of the British legal bureaucracy. So I have made the kind of general statement about the brothel and the distinction and the bias against Shamima Begum, who is literally born in England, English born. She cannot be denied that description, but she has been denied access to the court in the fair way that she needs to have in order to properly and competently and thoroughly put her case to a proper court or properly held court or tribunal against the Home Secretary's illegal behavior. And the fact that I called it brothel is also substantiated by the refusal of the so-called Supreme Court to justify its own illegal behavior. Because the Home Secretary at the time, Sajid Javid, behaved illegally and made facial gestures that were intended to please the racists and the gullibles. When he spewed in the House of Commons, as he declared or announced that he had removed the British nationality from Shamima Begum, he made facial gestures that showed contempt towards Shamima Begum and complicity with and capitulation to the racist lobby and the racists at large across the UK and especially in England. So on all those fundamental grounds and facts, the British Supreme Court has acted as a brothel, which was the de facto description given by his first so-called president, David Neuberger, as reported by the British spies connected reporter called the Home Editor, Martin Bentham, operating at the London Evening, No Standards Standard. So we shall keep that updated version of our commentary there. And then we shall move on to today's Fleet Street papers that are running, as I have said before, and as I predicted, and as will be the case. The first half of the front page of the Daily Mirror, saying that Meghan said that she was gagged by the police, but now the police cannot gag her. Now, that's not an extremist statement, and that is not an untruthful statement. It's not a boast. It's a fact. Especially after Meghan has been subjected to the torrent of propaganda issued by Buckingham Palace to suit the image of Brenda, also known as Elizabeth II. And Elizabeth II has been used as an instrument as a tool by the Queen-to-be, Kate Middleton. And Kate Middleton is not going to be the Queen with the kind of discretion and powers that Brenda has had for nearly 60 years. But she will be running Wills, who has, on the facts published, had behaved as an extension of Kate Middleton's agenda. And of course, there are the additional hangers-on like Carol Middleton, Kate Middleton's mother, who is piling on the pressure on Meghan and Harry at the expense of free speech and fair treatment, because they are saying that it was the Oprah Winfrey interview that actually, in effect, exacerbated the heart condition that Philip is in hospitals with. But the actual fact is that Meghan has been in contact with Oprah for several years. Meghan is an American, and she had been a well-known, at least artist, actress in her own rights. And so it is quite possible that as a woman of mixed parentage, African origin mother and white father, she would have had more than one occasional meetings and contacts with Oprah Winfrey even before she married Harry. It is possible. I'm not giving any dates or any incident or you can, but that is the possibility. So to say, as the Fleet Street liars for Brenda are saying, that interview, the timing of the airing of the interview is connected now with the likely impact in adversely affecting the health of Philip. How do they work that out? Because the interview has not been published, and the interview's focus is not Philip at all. So what the Carol Middleton has done is announce her own kind of delaying of something very petty and small. But she has made it bigger, magnified it beyond reasonable proportion. And she has said, in effect, that she is a graceful human being as compared with the supposed disgraceful human being, Meghan Markle. So Kate Middleton, Carol Middleton are pumping this child, Diana's eldest child, because Diana apparently has had at least 3 children, these 2 boys and another one with some different not very widely known father. So the wheels is being pumped by Kate Middleton and Carol Middleton. And the scenario is that in no time, I mean, this is just a matter of time after Brenda passes away, and if Wills follows after Charlie, Brian, that is, then by the time they get settled, Carol Middleton and Kate Middleton will be the subject of initially murmurs and then very, very disturbing revelations. This is what I'm saying here in Diagnosing Fleet Street. They will do that for various reasons, quite apart from the fact that there will be a group of fans or supporters of Meghan Markle and Harry who will be on the standby and be on the lookout for any kind of information that they can put into the public domain showing Carol Middleton as the leader of the maneuvering warfare for taking over of the royalty or royal family. And initially, that is the purpose. So anyone comes in the way of that will be attacked and savaged, which is what is happening to Meghan and Harry. They may not have been the original targets, but they are among the first people to bear the brunt of Carol Middleton's agenda. Nobody is saying that in Fleet Street. I'm saying it. And I'm saying it by calculating, adding together all the facts and creating the mosaic that Carol Middleton is the queen now on maneuvers. How many miles out of the main garden of attack? It doesn't matter, but she is on maneuvers, and she has been on maneuvers in order to take over Buckingham Palace and the monarchy de facto. And there is a lot of money, millions, hundreds of millions of pounds, even billions, reaching billions, are at stake. If Carol Middleton can create an empire by association with the monarchy, that's it. They can sell anything. They can even sell worse stuff than Gwyneth Paltrow has been able to do. And so therefore, this is the reason why the battle is on against Meghan. She has to be subdued and she must be made to surrender. And Meghan, being an American person, unlike Wallis Simpson, is in a completely different league. Not only is she not white in the way that Wallis Simpson was, but she also has her own kind of base among the public, among sections of the public. And the fact that she is now married to Harry has created extraordinary dedication to her on the part of people of the mainly African origins. So she has got increasing base of popular support among people of African origin. And in the USA, this is significant and it will increase. Not only is Meghan about the same age as or similar age to the main squad of congresswomen, she is likely to be in very good touch and contact with most of them. And also, there is this increasing confidence among the publicly known figures and activists in the USA that the narrative against racism in the USA in the current form is going to have to be strengthened in order to survive and in order to beat the racists who are on the upsurge in the USA. So Oprah Winfrey is essentially a very important kind of connector of all these activists and all these narratives. So Brenda, whoever is advising her, of course, apart from Carol Middleton and Kate Middleton using her as a stooge, Brenda is at the wrong phase of the decline of the British Raj and Empire. And Brenda has made two strategic errors in the recent past. One being this one, attack on Meghan and Harry, and her permission to the racists in Fleet Street to have all-out attack and war on Meghan and Harry. And the other is, of course, she supported Brexit. Now, all accounts, all the evidence, and we're talking internationally, all the evidence available on the international front is that Brexit, well, they have actually devised the word Maxit, but Brexit has been an economic, a social, international, political, and legal disaster for Britain. And the congenital liar, Boris Johnson, congenital liar is the word or the phrase used against Boris Johnson by many people, but the most outspoken, the most notable establishment figure that has been reportedly saying the same thing is the French ambassador, a woman who was here for several years until her recent retirement. And it also is a bad news that this woman particularly is a fan of China at the wrong time, because China currently is enjoying a very bad press in Britain. And the Chinese have concluded a very significant agreement with the European Union, the remaining European Union. Now that has also put at risk the prospect of the Biden-fronted administration in the USA getting any headway against China. Now that's bad news for Narendra Modi as well, because Modi needs the USA against China. And if the Chinese have successfully concluded a deal with the remaining European Union, then the European Union is most unlikely to have a similar favorable deal with India, because that would be worth far less than the deal with the Chinese that the European Union has actually concluded. Now, quite apart from that particular piece, the various business shifts and movements away from British base, the international businesses, especially finance ones, are going apace, and they are very worrying indeed. And the Fleet Street newspapers are lying by pretending that that's not happening, but that is happening. And here is a typical corrupt kind of headline in the Times. It is saying that even the stronger variant of the virus will not hold Britain back. Now, this is a political slogan. It's not a scientific slogan, but they're putting in a scientist to make that political statement, just like David Lidington had David Neuberger make an utterance as a pimp for the brothel that was the British course for very rich, wealthy foreigners. I mean, there is no way that the behavior and the decision and the wordings of the Supreme Court as mouthed and spewed by Reid on television on the 26th of February 2021 will go unchallenged more kind of comprehensively than it has been challenged so far by other institutions and other observers. And the Human Rights Watch, which is a non-governmental organization, mainly based in, I think, New York, of course, had their UK kind of spokesperson or director, a woman who has got an apparently Muslim name. She could be a Pakistani or she could be from an Arab country. I'll have to check that. But she was immediately given a platform by LBC after the ruling against Shamima Begum by the Supreme Court on Friday, 26th of February 2021. Now, the Human Rights Watch, apart from Amnesty International, is among about 3 or 4 organizations like that do their business. It's a careerist kind of platform. It's not a campaigning platform, as the Amnesty International is a careerist platform, not a campaigners platform. So they make the routine ritual, kind of going through the motion, kind of criticism or critical comments, as this woman did on Friday, the 26th of February 2021 on LBC radio. Now, anyone not actually living in the UK or anyone who is living in the UK but is not as informed about the operation of the mainstream as they should be in order to understand what I'm about to say about LBC. This is what they need to know. LBC, which has operated from 1973, and I took part in 1973 when it launched in various phone-ins. 1973, so you can see it was not the age of the internet or anything. So I made the phone calls, and quite a few. They're not accessible. They're not necessarily accessible, available, or archived or identifiable. But I did make a significant number of calls that were broadcast on LBC, especially around the Entebbe raid by the Israelis that did a highly kind of publicized raid on the Entebbe airport. And the reason why I made that call in 1973 to the LBC, which was broadcast, was the disproportionate lies that the British media was publishing in support of the violation of the country that was targeted by the Israelis in the Entebbe raid. I didn't support the taking of the hostage or the kidnapping or the kind of disruption of the Israeli plane. I think the Israelis were justified to do the necessary to rescue their citizens and other people affected by the kind of hijack or whatever it was. What I said was, in effect, and if anyone has the access to that phone call that I made, is welcome to retrieve it and let me have a copy of it. But otherwise, what I remember as saying was that there were many people in Britain at the time who were pushed into poverty, especially many elderly people that were neglected and pushed into poverty, and their plight and their experience of the sufferings should be given due attention and should be reported properly. That is what I said, and that was the context. And it was again about mainly the role of the media. Now that was 73. So 83, 93, 2003, 13, that is 40. And this is now 8 years. Just 2 years short of 50 years ago. And today, in the mainstream, there are two themes or two topics that are dominating the critical side of the kind of media, critical side of the public, that is, which is saying that Rishi Sunak has neglected the elderly and the caring kind of crisis. So 48 years ago, I was talking about this. Just think about that. And I was on air broadcasting as a caller on LBC radio. So this woman, 48 years later, or 48 years since my particular broadcast on LBC in 1973, this woman, described as the UK director of the Human Rights Watch, she does get the platform on the LBC, and she does get a spot about the ruling just published on that day, Friday, the 26th of February, 2021, against Shamima Begum. And what does she do, this director, UK director of the Human Rights Watch? She produces one of the most predictable series of idiotic words and phrases. Whatever she said is not going to show the UK Supreme Court or the racists in the Supreme Court and the racists in the Home Office any loss of sleep, because she is not telling the truth about their corruption, their bias, their illegality, and the illegal act of ignoring the law and the legal obligation and taking away the nationality of a child who was born in England and who thereby got or gained or had British nationality automatically by birth. She didn't say any of that. This director, if she did not do in any way that I'm saying it. And what I'm saying is that the behavior of the Supreme Court and the behavior of the Home Secretary in place at the time, anytime, now the ugly behaving Priti Patel, and previously the ugly behaving and ugly moaning about coconut, being called a coconut, Sajid Javid. Now in this context, when I'm referring to Sajid Javid and Priti Patel, I have to bring in somebody that I last physically, kind of face-to-face, kind of told off. I condemned the little midget, Amit Roy. Now, Amit Roy is almost as tall as Brian Hayes of the LBC. Now, I talked about LBC and me in 1973, but I continued confronting the racists on LBC for years, until I think 1972, 92. When the last racist on the LBC that I encountered was a moron called Robbie Vincent. Now, Robbie Vincent was the racist liar who interrupted me while he had invited me to speak about the campaign I was leading, mobilizing at the time in 1992 in defense of the parents of the Stratford School. And after Robbie Vincent, I think Robbie Vincent lost his post not long after, but and LBC also became in effect decommissioned. That is to say, it lost a lot of audience because of racist morons and criminals like Robbie Vincent and other idiots who were given platforms on LBC, quite apart from Brian Hayes. But then there was a hiatus. There was a few years of the LBCs literally being de facto dead. And then they contracted various things and they set themselves up as a different kind of thing, which is what LBC is now. LBC now is a like shock jock fronted kind of outlet, radio outlet. And it has expanded its reach. Although it's called London Radio, LBC, London Broadcasting Corporation, it actually is now almost UK-wide or England-wide. So this woman, who is director of Human Rights Watch, was given a spot by an already very dedicated racist radio station. So for a start, it would not give her any spot if it suspected that she would say anything genuine, original, let alone original and genuine against racism and racist media. Because the actual venom and hatred have been being kind of led and maintained for the last 6 calendar years against Shamima Begum and the other girls has taken place, has been carried out by the Fleet Street media. And the Fleet Street papers have been imitated or copied by the others that are published from regions and other towns outside of London. And the same theme, the same narrative that the Fleet Street papers have carried out against Shamima Begum has been imitated in effect by the BBC. And despite the fact that the Times defense correspondent, so-called Anthony Lloyd, did the so-called first interview with Shamima Begum, and then he was followed by Rohit Kachru and others from ITV and some others in the BBC. The one in the BBC that, or at the BBC that has done quite a few reports at the expense of Shamima Begum and against Shamima Begum is Dominic Carciani. Now, that idiot, I shall go on update on his idiocy later. That idiot actually misdescribed Shamima Begum's origin because he called her a Bangladeshi. She is not. By birth, she is English born, British national. So she cannot be called Bangladeshi. She can be called a person whose parents are Bangladeshis or has Bangladeshi origin or Bangladeshi legacy, but she is not Bangladeshi. Not a national of Bangladesh, never has been and never would be. She is of Bangladeshi background. So Dominic Carciani, the moron, exposed his stupidity and racist ignorance and contempt by that kind of phrase. So what I have been saying in the last few minutes, if the principles of what I've been saying are put together and put in a short form, it would be a racist, ignorant, corrupt, illegal, unlawful kind of set of behavior against the rights of Shamima Begum. That's how it could be. And that very summarized form would apply to the behavior against Shamima Begum by the London Borough of Towners Council. In the context of our campaign against Towners Council and for justice as part of the justice campaign for Shamima Begum, Towners Council initially should be held accountable for their illegal behavior and the illegal bias and the illegal negligence of Shamima Begum's rights, as they were obliged to safeguard this child and the other two children or the other three children according to the duties now known as safeguarding children duties. And safeguarding children duties became topical locally in the wake of the publication in the Times, Independent Online, of a piece byline to Ted Jury and about the fact that one of the racist killers of Shiblu Rahman, the Bangladeshi that was killed 20 years ago in the Bow area in London, that one of Shiblu Rahman's racist killers had been given profuse kind of platform by the Hrs Council and was given a job at the Ian Mikado School, which is not at all outside of the neighborhood in the estate area where Shiblu Rahman was murdered by Ian Devlin and his other co-killers and murderers, or co-racist attackers, co-racist killers, and the murderers, because the convictions of a number of those murderers and killers was not a single conviction, it was separate convictions and separated by two broad categories. One was that the killers were not all murderers because of the alleged difference in the mens rea, that is the intention. So Ian Devlin was described correctly as the racist killer, one of the racist killers. He was not described as the racist murderer. But the attack on Shiblu Rahman that resulted in his death was separated into murdering intent and what is called manslaughter, not intended to murder. So Ian Devlin was classified as a racist killer, not as a racist murderer. So that was the manslaughter side that he was categorized under. Despite the fact that he was not called a convicted racist murderer, he was called convicted racist killer. That's only an academic distinction. The fact is that he was as responsible for the murdered victim's murder and death as the others, whatever the classification. And this manslaughter and the murder distinction is a worrying distinction in the English law, which exposes English law to the charge correctly that it's corrupt and it's actually open to abuse by the murderers, which it has been always for a long time, as long as the distinction has existed historically. And the Law Commission, which exists to supposedly advise impartially on the various legal kind of legislative programs, has been exposed as a completely useless outfit now. About the English legal bureaucracy and the role of the Law Commission and various other agencies and kind of organizations supposedly in existence for improving the state of the legislation and the state of the law in various fields. The Law Commission is useless, as is the currently shelter, the so-called housing campaign is advertising its achievement as campaigner. Now that is a lie. Shelter, as I've said before, was one of the things that were set up after Ken Leach's film Kathy Come Home in the 1960s. But shelter has been taken over for most of its life so far by a bunch of self-serving criminal liars who have been aiding and abetting the crisis of housing and the crisis of homelessness for decades. And as I've said, but now I make this reference as an update that all these organizations that I mentioned diagnostically are not theoretically situated outside of my experience. I am more engaged in campaigning against these organizations than anybody else, and I have been. Not because I wanted to or because I had the kind of intention to, but I had been left with no option but to hold them to account and tell them off for their lying, because it was affecting, their lying was affecting millions of people and their rights. So that is what I've been doing. And my most kind of significant face-to-face confrontation took place at the church off Fleet Street, which is the church for journalists, so-called. There was a public meeting about housing, homelessness, etc. in the 1980s. And the meeting was addressed by the New Zealand-born racist Desmond Wilson. Now, Desmond Wilson was long time involved with Shelter as chief executive or whatever. And Desmond Wilson made the speech. At the end of his speech, I stood up and I challenged one aspect of the facts that he had mentioned. And I said that that is not true. And guess what? This moron immediately answered in the most plasticky, racist, reflex way. He said, I have been helping your people. Now, he doesn't know who I am. And he didn't know who I was, and he didn't know who my people were. Because what this racist was implying by your people was all these people that he associated with me in terms of appearance or ethnicity or something. But he most certainly wasn't talking about white people or European people. And he assumed that I came from the kind of level of background which is, in his perception, very low in terms of whatever. So right in front of the mainly white audience, I told him off. And I said that he was behaving exactly as the racist criminal and liar that Shelter had been taken over by and had been colluding with the creation of the crisis in housing. He assumed that he knew more than I did, or his involvement in real campaigns was higher than mine. That could not be further from the truth. And that racist Desmond Wilson is not the only one. Many of the other so-called big-name charities operating in England and UK, I have had to confront them on the basis of their racist and ignorant and stupid utterances and their corrupt and criminal behavior in colluding with the various decision makers that cause homelessness and deprive other people of housing, etc. So it refers to all the personalities concerned at the time. Now, shelter, as the facts show, is a corrupt bureaucracy, because what it does is like Boris Johnson, he steals the headline, and shelter does the same. Say there is a report by some other organization or campaigners saying that the number of people being evicted, despite the pandemic and despite the ban on evictions, is higher than people think. So shelter will make a statement about that as well. So it will immediately enter the frame of the topical propaganda and publicity, and thus suggest or enhance the suggestion on its part that it's doing the relevant job. And there are others, smaller in terms of the finance and the funding, other similar charitable organizations claiming to be involved in dealing with homelessness, housing crisis, and so on. One of the others is, of course, crisis. Now, crisis does the homelessness thing, but it is currently and has been run by crooks and liars. The Salvation Army, which is a mainly Christian kind of religious thing, but it is de facto a provider, pretend provider, let's say, of housing to homeless people. And in that role, it has created a business front, which means that the Salvation Army earns millions of pounds from the poorest of people, and it gets the money from the department, deprivation, poverty creation, and deprivation, want, and poverty creation. So Salvation Army's image is one of caring for the most kind of homeless and destitute and whatever. But it is a fascist operation. And it's not held to account by anybody. So the Salvation Army, shelter, crisis, and on the animal front, the RSPCA and the children's charity, NSPCC, these are amongst the worst behaving, worst offending charitable organizations in England that serves as the de facto publicity and propaganda kind of component and army for the corrupt central government. Remember, I have been in contact and in confrontation with most of the judicial layers and tiers, as I have been with more than one in sub-court, and with the Law Society and the RS Solicitors Regulation, SRA authority, as I have been with many members of Parliament, many members of the peerage, the House of Peers, and so on. So when I say diagnosing Fleet Street, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, remember that I am not an outsider. I am more than an insider. I don't write for money. I have never written really for money. And I don't broadcast for money. And I don't do the campaign for money. And it is with all that evidence that I invite anyone who is watching this to point out any inaccuracies, factual inaccuracies that I have unintentionally kind of stated as part of the flow of the broadcast, because I'm doing the broadcast without having any script in front of me. And even if I'm knowledgeable, without having a script is not as easy as it may look. Most broadcasts are done by participants or speakers with written outlines or guidelines, and the running order as well helps. And there is a lot of more support than this broadcast is having, because I'm doing it without anyone being in the background. And this is what I was referring to earlier about the fact that Meghan, an American, had been in contact with Oprah for years. But they are twisting it here. Now imagine, they're calling it a plot. Now, if it was Kate Middleton or her mother, Carol Middleton, they would say it's a divine, it's a blessing. And they would raise the status of Carol Middleton and Kate Middleton to that of the Anglican Church clergy, the Archbishop or something. Now, if Meghan has been in talks with Oprah for 3 years, what's wrong with that? Because many documentaries necessarily take quite a long time in order to get the facts right, in order to do the research, in order to get the context and everything. But what they are doing is painting Meghan Markle as an obsessed self-promoter. Now, she doesn't come across as that. For a start, her career as an actress, it wasn't a gift by anybody. Like any actress or actor, she got a part or parts in the series or in more than one film. That cannot be held against her, and that cannot be ignored, because it is inconvenient to admit that she is an accomplished professional in their language, not in my language, but in their language, that she was an accomplished actor even years before she met Harry. So that spite is ongoing, and it will be kind of raised to the highest possible kind of pitch up to the last minute before the Oprah Winfrey interview goes on air. And the Murdoch dirty digger scum is shamelessly describing this alleged 3-year period in contract with Oprah Winfrey that Meghan has been as a new royal bombshell. It's not a bombshell at all. The bombshell is that Boris Johnson is robbing billions from the public and filling the pockets of conservative donors. And Boris Johnson is looting money that belongs to the low-paid, various parts of the low-paid in the National Health Service and in other parts of society and businesses. That Matt Hancock has been caught corruptly giving millions of pounds to his neighbor. That Johnson has not sacked this woman who has been given the millions of pounds for track and tracing. And all of these are serious issues that affect millions of people's welfare and many people's lives and safety. Instead of running stories showing those, they are focusing on the shamelessly racist campaign of hate that they are inciting against Meghan Markle, who hasn't done anything wrong. He hasn't taken any money from the public in this country, and she has not deceived anyone. And there is an almost naked picture of this self-seeking, sub-pornographic celeb, Amanda Holden. And I've got 2 pages against Meghan Markle. And it says, Meghan, Palace banned pre-wedding interview. And Meghan says to Oprah Winfrey, I couldn't even talk to you without the camp sitting there. That is the new dig, they say, at the farm, that is the monarchy, to Oprah. And they found somebody who is apparently an ex-co-actor on the Suits series, and whom they're now citing as attacking Meghan and Harry. Now they will do that. They will continue to do that up to tomorrow, the day of the scheduled broadcast of the interview. And then they will be continuing afterwards. Monday's Sun will be even more hostile and cruel and brutal against Meghan and Harry. And they will find any kind of source to demonize them. And they've got 2 more pages 12 and 13, against Meghan on the Sun. And what we shall use this summary to relate to is the racism inflicted on Shamima Begum and her friends. We are still looking for verification as to the name of the 4th child that left the UK in 2014, a year before, or at least calendar year before the 3 girls, Shamima Begum and the other 2. Now, even if there was a calendar year difference separating the 4, one in a group of 3 and the other is the sole one, other one. Because one of the reports says, or one of the accounts that we have retrieved from the internet, that says, as the motive for Shamima and the 2 friends going into Syria, one of the reasons, one of the pieces that we have accessed and retrieved says that they went to Syria in order to convince their friend to come back. That's a very significant kind of insertion of an alleged motive for their going to Syria. So it's not as if they just went there to join an extremist or radical whatever or terrorist outfit. They went there to convince their friend to come back. Remember, these are children, teenage children, 14-year-old. She is being treated, she is being described and demonized as if she was of full age, like in her kind of 30s or 40s, who had done a lot of deliberations and thinking and plotting. They are in fact comparing them in terms of age, chronological age, with somebody like Meghan, who is a few chronological years older than Harry. But these are children. When they were being kind of photographed and filmed entering the Syrian territory from Turkey, or going to Syria from Turkey, they were children. And by all accounts, the absolute majority of children of that age are not, criminally motivated. Their mens rea is not there. The criminal intent to do crime is not there, most of the children. And the only evidence that criminologists have found of high degree of criminality or criminal propensities among children of that age have been linked with association, that they have been influenced by others of whatever age group. Say, for example, among the children in London of African origin or African background or Caribbean background, back Caribbean kind of parentage, the propensity to crime, including murders, has been explained by association. All the accounts, all the published accounts of the court proceedings, all the accounts that are based on the police interrogating them or collecting whatever evidence they have been able to, not all of them, most of them, let's say, the majority of the evidence produced before the court shows that many of the offenders were influenced by others. So this is why the role of the others is more important than the role of the actual perpetrator or offender, knife crime, gun crime, that sort of thing. These are not described as terrorism related or radicalism related. Pause there. So what's the difference between terrorism and radicalism related and not radicalism or terrorism related offense? If the actual event is the fatal stabbing of somebody or gunning of somebody else, then what's the difference? What is the difference in terms of the motive? Let those who refuse to accept that so-called black on black crime or so-called Asian on Asian crime, which is in numerical terms less frequent than the one called black on black crime. How many black young persons have been killed by other black young persons on average every year? That is many more than so-called radicalism linked offense. So society, that is to say parliament and the government, has to make a decision as to why that distinction should be maintained or not. And the role of the local council, locally elected council, so-called local parliament, let's say, needs to be established in asking questions and asking questions daily about what the local community is doing to safeguard the children. Well, the community cannot do anything to safeguard the children without the active and consistent support and initiative of the local council, which is the one that is funded. The local community is not funded and cannot be funded in the same way as the local council is and can be. And it is correct, therefore, that the local council has the duty imposed on it to safeguard the welfare of the children. So where was Tower Hamlets Council while Shamima Begum and her two friends and the other one, so all these four girls needed the council the most? Think about that. What contacts? Remember the concept of association. Most of the offenses by the black on black criminals are found to have been influenced by others. And more often than not, these offenses are carried out by groups, as was Ajmal Ahmad in the Langton Park area, Langton Park School area, in 2013 when he was murdered. He was murdered by a gang. That is a group. A gang means a group of criminally active persons. A gang in this context and in most contexts. And remember, the excusers of the gang life. The excusers of the gang life have been wrongly given platforms by the BBC and the ITV and Sky News or whatever on television. Ex-gang member or ex-gangsters are elevated to the position of spiritually enhanced and active souls, full of expertise. And then they are allowed the platform on television and radio to say that gang life is like a more secure family to them. So it's openly about association. Crime is justified or propelled or triggered by factors of the association. What the details are of these associations do not matter. What matters is the fact that the gang life or gang association is openly cited as justification for lethal crimes. So, to use or apply the association, the concept of association, as being responsible for whatever decisions these four guards made, did the Tower Hamlets Council actively consider any ongoing event or series of events which were about creating or maintaining that kind of association? These four guards on the one hand, and there would be or programmed manipulators or handlers at the other end or other ends, wherever they were based. If Tower Hamlets Council did that, or if Tower Hamlets Council did take care to ensure that it was protecting these children, then any rational person, responsible citizen or member of society would accept a statement along the lines that, yes, we did, but we can't give you the names and addresses of the people involved that we were keeping under surveillance. We shall accept that. The ordinary people would accept that. We are not asking for people's names and addresses or even gender, but what we are asking for is a confirmation, not a routine statement, but actual truthful confirmation to the fact that Tower Hamlets Council had a surveillance, a rigorous surveillance ongoing. And we found various things that can be mentioned without naming names. Because only naming names would expose anyone to personal threat and danger. But if you generally tell the truth, not make up a truth, generally tell the truth about the timeline of what the Tower Hamlets Council was doing in monitoring these children, then that would be enough as an account. We are not saying that Tower Hamlets Council could have physically done 100% safeguarding work. What we are saying is that Tower Hamlets Council should be held 100% to the requirements of accountability, because these girls' lives have been destroyed. As far as we know, or as far as publicly ascertainable, 3 of the 4 girls have died. You cannot have a worse. If you cannot have a worse outcome than that, these girls have died. And there is no evidence. There is no evidence accessible in public or to the public available that says that these girls did any crime. So what are they being demonized for? These are children. These are girls, for heaven's sake. Children, child age girls. We are talking from October 2010 up to, let's say, February 2015, when they're all children. What did Tower Hamlets Council do for the 5-6 years? Because whatever process or whatever contacts or association these children were exposed to must have happened during 2013, 2014, 2015. Because that girl who went to Syria, apparently, and rescue whom or retrieve whom from Syria, these 3 girls followed. She went in 2014, so she must have been already in contact, at least from 2013. So who in Tower Hamlets Council was actively carrying out the duties of the council to safeguard these children? Why? Because the BBC and Fleet Street were already carrying alleged reports of children being exposed to radicalism or radicalization. When there is such a high octane level of publicity allegedly against radicalizing children, wouldn't it be among the first emergency steps that a local council takes, because it is designated as the local council to safeguard the children? So what safeguarding emergency action did Tower Hamlets Council initiate and then maintain and then examine and audit in due course and at regular intervals? What report did the Tower Hamlets Council actually commission, specifically examining all the facts and all its roles and all its duties after the reports in the mainstream came out about the 3 girls, including Shamima Begum, crossing into Syria in February 2015? What was the report? Who did the report? And what did it find? And when did Tower Hamlets Council actually publish that report? With the necessary reductions, that is to say, obscuring or omitting or deleting those parts that would identify individuals or expose individuals to any threat. What was the report? What date was the report published? And 100 other questions like that. When was John Biggs questioned by any of the councillors in Tower Hamlets? Between June 2015 and 26th of February 2021. Which councillor interrogated John Biggs about Shamima Begum and the children's welfare and well-being and safeguarding the children. We are not talking about prevent, because we have talked about prevent in a separate when we are keeping the prevent scheme separate from this discussion. Any current counselor who is kind of being dishonest or stupid by confusing the prevent and the safeguarding the children duties must stop doing that. By it's a complete confusion and wrong comparison. Because that doesn't have to have been a prevent scheme for Tower Hamlets Council to have rigorously carried out its safeguarding children duties. That is the wrong in confusing the two or relating the two. Even if the girls were not going to Syria, but they were in wrong communicational contracts, that is a threat and that is a violation of their safeguarding rights. Did Tower Hamlets Council do the duties to deliver those rights and protection and safety to the girls? The various excuses that the current crop of Bangladeshi background counselors make are absolutely dishonest. Because none of the counselors in place currently or in place since, let's say, the 2018 election has made any comment, any statement, or published any questions that they may have put to John Biggs. As far as I know, they have not made any statement. It's not that even if they made a statement, it would have made any difference to the plight these girls have been put into. But it would at least show that unlike John Biggs, these counselors, so-called, were at least concerned about their duties as elected counselors and were concerned about the welfare and the safety of these girls and the children. To that extent, it would at least exonerate them of full blame for capitulating to John Biggs's agenda of racist negligence. Now, there have been other claims, including claims against the police and the claim that the police kept the children's families in darkness, in the dark. Now, the question is, if that is the case, we didn't make that claim because we have no evidence, we have not investigated the evidence, and we have had no access to the full details and data. But we have read in the papers that there has been an allegation to the effect that the police kept the children's families in the dark about what they were doing. If that is the case, then the role of the counselors after that claim became public needs to be examined. What did the counselors do? Did the counselors ask the questions, seeking the full facts about what the police did or didn't do? And this applies to what the local MP, Rushnara Ali, did or didn't do. And all the questions that we have put and we have been putting and updating about the safeguarding children duties and the silence of John Biggs and the silence of the other counselors applied to Rushnar Ali. That school is Dainford School in our book. And as I said yesterday, I did campaign to keep the school, Dainford School, a single-sex school. But I was kind of betrayed by the brainwashed morons, including a liar who was involved as a teacher at the school. And with a small number, very small number of votes, our attempt to oppose the changing of the school's composition from being a single-sex boys' school to mixed-sex school was defeated. And the consequences are there. Well, the consequences are there not just about the safeguarding children duties, but my ongoing educational campaign, education rights campaign, has as one of the fundamental demands that parents themselves be given ongoing education about the education of their children. That is one of my original programs. And I shall come to why that program has not been given the support that it has deserved and society has deserved. And the fact that the children's parents and guardians have not been given the ongoing education has cost lives, literally, and will cost lives as well in the future. So the questions contain all aspects of formal schooling, formal education, actual education, community-based support education, and more, much more. And in this context, I say the attack in August 2012 carried out on the Kitten's home or Kitten's house in Brick Lane was part of the attack on the whole community that was carried out by Tower Hamlets Council in collusion with other criminals. And the price that the community is paying as a result of that attack is beyond calculation. And we shall give the calculation update in due course later. Now back to Tower Hamlets and back to Fleet Street and back to justice for Shamima Begum. And this is Saturday. Look at the pack. The Guardian boasts that this is a paper revolution. And they're talking about discover the story of paper. Open this pack for your Saturday supplements. And there is nothing in there that answers the questions that we have about Tower Hamlets Council failing in safeguarding the children duties as owed to Shamima Begum and the other children between 2010 up to February 2015. And the Guardian on the front page is saying that nurses are threatening strike action against Hancock because of Hancock's lying and betrayal over the budget. And the Guardian is also continuing the propaganda for Boris Johnson. And it's saying that Johnson is anxiously waiting to see if his gamble over opening schools pays off. Remember what we said about Shamima Begum. They've been talking about children, large number of children losing and missing out on on educational schooling because of the lockdown. Now, that is a very sentimental, emotional issue. Because if you say that children are losing or missing schooling, then more people are prepared to support the concern and support the sequence, a consequent kind of event. And that is right. That is how it should be. Because children deserve the most protection and support, although they're not given by Johnson and the conservatives because they're starving. They're not funding the poverty-stricken children. And other people have had to be campaigning for that. So that shows the organizational kind of hostility and lack of care towards children's rights in the behavior and the agenda of the government. Compared to that, local councils, including Tower Hamlets, are part of the lobby that says that they are better at helping children than the central government, which may be marginally correct on the whole. But what about neglecting children like Shamima Begum and the other three? Tower Hamlets Council has no answer, not so far anyway. So what we are saying to Tower Hamlets Council is not just about Shamima Begum. When I campaigned against the Royal London Hospital and against the London Ambulance Service and against the then Secretary of State for Health at the expense of health, Virginia Bottomley, in 1994-95, I did that in my own initiative, at my own initiative, despite the fact that Tower Hamlets Council, which had all kinds of connections and duties towards Nasima Begum, aged 11, who was killed because of the negligence of the London Ambulance Service and the Royal London Hospital. Tower Hamlets Council wasn't doing anything. And the fact that Lutfur Rahman is an uncaring individual, whatever his age, is related to this really. Days after I was approached by Nasima Begum's distraught father, Mr. Eklasur Rahman, to help his family with the grief and with overcoming the grief, and also in trying to get to understand why it happened to them. I was coming out of the Aldgate Eastern kind of exit, when into the underground a person was going into the underground at that time. And the person was Lutfur Rahman. Now he was a young person whom I had last had any conversation with about 14 years earlier, when he was introduced to me as a teenage schoolboy by a number of my students, ex-students, and they called him their kind of people. So he addressed me as he should, as my ex-students did, as normally it is not a kind of one-off thing, as sir. The reason why I'm referring to that is important, because I have been called sir since well before Lutfur Rahman was biologically born. So it's not some kind of thing that I crave or I make a special case for. It is part of the normal exchanges involved in my work. So, what happened at that meeting, chance meeting, in the Aldgate East tube station was Luther greeted me and I asked him how he was. And he said he was a solicitor. And he gave me a card, what is called the calling card, that appeared to be describing him as a solicitor, or at least working with a kind of firm of solicitor. Based on that alone, I said, I said very briefly that I was involved in a campaign that I had just started, or I had to start for the family of Nasima Begum, the 11-year-old girl that had died as a result of the negligence of the London hospital and the London ambulance service. So I rang him a few days later. The reason I rang him was because I wanted to have somebody as the formally instructable licensed law trader, so that I could give the complete, comprehensive kind of instruction in order to take on the Royal London Hospital and the London Ambulance Service and the Secretary of State. If he had agreed, he would have had to do nothing except to take down my instructions, because no solicitor, no barrister is a better draftsman than I am, a better drafter of a statement of claims than I am. I say it on the record. Let anyone who disagrees tell me the evidence on which they say that they found the disagreement. So Luther Rahman, apart from anything else, would have become instantaneously admitted to a very high-profile campaign that would really build him as a solid licensed law trader. So I rang him and I said, this is the case, and will you take the instructions? And he said, no. He didn't say to me that he was sorry that Nasima Begum had died and he wished he could help. But he said no, plainly no. There was no evidence of any sign of any statement by Lutfur Rahman to me on the telephone that he had any sympathy for the family or any regard for the loss of that child's life. That is Lutfur Rahman, who became incumbent as the so-called elected mayor in October 2010. And that is the time I'm saying, and I've been saying, that if the girls were kind of misled by any third party or parties, then they were beginning to get into a kind of line or lane about that time when they would have been 10 years old, roughly. So, did Tower Hamlets Council have in place clear, identifiable safeguarding children activities? If they did, what was or were these measures called? Who was or were held responsible for the conduct of such a measure or measures? How did it get implemented, it or those? And how was it or those get audited? Who monitored the operation? How frequently did the monitoring take place? What are the various things that they did that can be published without compromising anyone's confidentiality, let alone impacting adversely on any national security concerns? So we're giving the full constitutional framework. What did Tower Hamlets Council do? And when was the last time that any Tower Hamlets councillor asked these questions? And if they did, where was the source or sources of their questioning? Where did they learn about these questions that I'm putting? And did they share any concern about the safeguarding children duties that Tower Hamlets Council clearly failed? When I published a video, in 2017, I did that specifically detailing Tower Hamlets Council safeguarding the children duties. And there are literally hundreds of notes that I published. I published hundreds of notes in the comment section of the video, which is still online, during 2017 and 2018, updating on and reporting on the various illegalities, racist negligence and failures committed by Tower Hamlets Council about safeguarding children and about the duties. I have published since 2017. And whoever viewed the video, there are so far several hundred people. If it was one individual, I don't know, but there are the record of the viewing numbers. There are hundreds of views or hundreds of recorded views are attached to that video. Are the Tower Hamlets councillors who have suddenly woken up about Shamima Begum saying that they never heard of that video that has been online, YouTube video, that in every single comment that I have published mentions Tower Hamlets Council? So the search engines would have produced that connection. Are all these councillors saying that they never heard of that video? Because if they're saying that, then they're lying. And that would be in keeping with their record otherwise. That in the main, they have been lying and they have been in denial. Now, quite why they lie is not for me to explain, but the fact that they lie is for me to assert. And what the Mail on Sunday has been ordered now yesterday. This is the second order that I was talking about earlier, or previous edition. That the mail group has been ordered to comply with two separate claims by Meghan Markle. And this latest one is that the Mail on Sunday must publish a front page statement by Meghan, or front page Meghan statement. The 2019 item about which Meghan successfully sued the Mail on Sunday was printed next to the main front page splash by Mail on Sunday, describing Jeremy Corbyn as unfit for office. So the narrative of hostility towards people either in the Labour Party or black people like Meghan is consistent with the record of the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. So they're hostile to Jeremy Corbyn, they're hostile to Meghan Markle. And this really does discredit the Brenda's family, royal family. Because Brenda has yet, after nearly 60 years in the throne, Brenda has failed to make a statement against racism. She's not going to get away with this one because the annus horribilis that she has brought on herself is going to extend to many years of horribilis. She may use as attack kind of weapons the Fleet Street and British mainstream against Meghan or Harry. But she will fail. Because there is only so much that the lies and racism can be substantiated. The truth will come out. For example, the fact that there was this hostile environment directive issued by Theresa May against people of the mainly Windrush generation coming from Jamaica, landing at Tilbury port in the 1950s, that there was a hostile environment imposed by order, by direction of Theresa May, came out to haunt her up to the last day in office, although she kind of maintained a composure pretense. Theresa May is tarnished forever as another racist. And it goes on. Johnson obviously will leave number 10 Downing Street tomorrow or another day. But Johnson will not be able to live the life that he may think he's entitled to. He will be forever known as the congenital liar and racist and an enemy of the people, poor people, and other people that he has been maligning. Now, what about Luther Roman? Who is going to justify Tower Hamlets Council during 2010 and 2015 up to February 2015 and its failures about these girls, failures and betrayals of these 4 girls? Who is going to explain this? There is no sign that anyone is going to explain this. Not from the East London Mosque Committee, not from the Council of Mosques in Tower Hamlets, not from the London Muslim Centre. And who is going to explain John Biggs's silence from 11th June 2015 up to the 26th of February? What secret is John Biggs hiding? We shall continue.